a place where deals were made under the guise of culinary delight, and secrets were traded as casually as pastries. Nestled amidst towering skyscrapers, its exterior was adorned with cascading vines of wisteria and jasmine, infusing the air with sweet fragrances that danced through the gentle breeze. The cafe's facade was a charming retro mix of brick and glass, with indoor greenery that aimed to replicate a serene garden. Morning glories and bougainvillea climbed the wrought iron balconies, while the windows shimmered invitingly, reflecting the vibrancy of life beyond. Inside, the atmosphere pulsed with the energy of ambition and aspiration. Patrons occupied every table, draped in designer attire and lost in animated conversations that dipped and soared like melodic symphonies. Laughter rang out like chimes, harmonizing with the soft classical music that wafted through the air, creating a delightful background for whispered negotiations and casual meetings. The waitstaff moved with a practiced grace, their faces a mask of unfaltering professionalism, guiding trays laden with steaming lattes and delicate croissants, each act a testament to the cafe's reputation for excellence. At a coveted table in the heart of this bustling haven sat Bernard Green, a man who wore power like a well-tailored suit. At 72, Bernard commanded attention effortlessly, his presence exuding authority even as he adjusted his gold-rimmed glasses. A mogul of sorts, he had spent a lifetime amassing wealth through real estate development, shaping the skyline of the city with ostentatious buildings that bore more resemblance to monuments than mere structures. His life was a tapestry woven with threads of ambition, success, and the occasional betrayal, but he basked in the glow of his accomplishments, resting on the laurels of his triumphs. Across from him sat Marissa, his radiant wife, a woman often admired for her beauty, a striking vision with raven-black hair cascading elegantly over her shoulders, her eyes a piercing shade of blue that seemed to hold unspoken stories of intrigue. Marissa was the envy of many, seamlessly blending high fashion with an effortless grace that spoke to her wealth. Yet, even in this serene moment, there was a dissonance beneath the surface. She occasionally glanced at her smartphone, tapping her manicured fingers on the glass screen, seemingly detached from the vibrant energy surrounding them. It was a stark comparison to Bernard, who was deeply engrossed in the thrill of his surroundings, reveling in the lively banter and his own achievements. Just outside the cafe's charming patio fence lingered Malik, a boy of 13, toughened by the harshness of street life yet still grappling with the innocence of youth. His oversized hoodie hung, rumpled and tattered, over slender shoulders, disguising his angular frame from a world too proud to notice him. He was often found scouring the streets of the city in search of scraps to eat, his keen eyes ever watchful. Wishing to blend into humanity while feeling the cruel sting of neglect, Malik had become adept at finding shelter in the shadows, observing the lives of the wealthy who seemingly towered above him on their gilded pedestals. Yet at this moment, as he pressed his back against the cool iron fence and watched the affluent go about their lives, Malik felt an irritating tug at his instinct. The vibrant laughter and animated chatter of the cafe muffled the whispers of his hunger, the gnawing void within him growing louder. He had learned over time how to switch between invisible and noticeable, a fine line he treaded upon carefully. Today, however, a sense of urgency pulsed in the air, making his spine tingle with foreboding. As Bernard immersed himself in conversation about his latest venture with a business associate seated nearby, Malik's sharp gaze remained locked on Marissa. He noticed her sliding a small vial from the depths of her chic handbag. The vial's glass glinted subtly in the sunlight. It was as if it contained the power of fate within its small confines. His heart raced as he braced himself, uncertainty churning in the pit of his stomach. He hadn't meant to intrude upon their world, yet the instinct to protect surged within him like a tidal wave. Reaching closer, he squinted for clarity. Was she really going to? An eruption of thoughts spiraled through his mind, but one stood out with the potency of a drumbeat. Something was terribly amiss. Melissa, completely uninhibited by the world around her, tipped the vial ever so carefully, allowing its clear contents to pour into Bernard's carefully crafted bowl of soup. "Stop her!" The word bubbled in his throat, but it convulsed against the constraints of his upbringing. Every fiber of his being screamed for action, yet he hesitated. It felt dangerous to barrel into what was clearly the domain of the privileged. Still, the very thought of inaction bore down upon him, as suffocating as the hunger gnawing at his insides. Mustering every ounce of courage he could find, Malik stepped forward from the shadows. "Don't eat that!" The words tumbled forth like a firecracker igniting with urgency, the once calm world of high society erupting into chaos. The cafe fell silent instantly, eyes darting in disbelief as Bernard's spoon paused halfway to his lips. "What did you just say?" Marissa's voice laced with disbelief and hostility shattered the stillness, whipping around to confront the boy. Her icy demeanor morphed into a tempest of rage tempered by the embarrassment of being exposed. Taking a deep breath, Malik pressed on. "I saw her put something in your soup. You can't eat it." The plea surged forward laden with raw desperation, his gaze unwavering as he bore witness to the horror of his claim. There was an electric tension in the air as whispers began to roll through the cafe. The collective attention shifted toward Malik, a storm brewing as others strained to hear the unfolding drama. Bernard, startled, broke his trance and turned his full attention to the boy, whose frail yet firm features drew intrigue and suspicion in equal measure. "What do you mean? What did you see?" Bernard demanded, curiosity resting with incredulity. "I swear, she poured something into your soup. A little vial." Malik's voice quavered, but there was a sense of determination behind it, a defiance born of a hidden, brave heart. "You have to believe me." The patrons attending to their luxuries fell into an uncomfortable hush, their eyes darting between the boy and the flashing indignation of Marissa. Her flawless exterior began to fracture, revealing traces of desperation as she scrambled for control. "This boy is just looking for attention. Why would you trust him? He's just a street rat." Bitterness coursed through Malik at the disdainful tone of her words, so casually wielded against him. There was an unspoken weight in the air, shifting like the currents of an approaching storm, and he could feel the eyes of the cafe upon him, weighing his words against theirs. Despite the numerous faces, it felt as if he were entirely alone within this tightly knit web of privilege. And yet, amid the whirlwind of chaos, Malik found that he could not retreat. With a gruff tone, Bernard took charge, signaling for the waiter. "I want this investigated immediately." There was a newfound authority in his voice, one that commanded respect, the kind no one dared question. A murmur of disbelief and curiosity swept over the others as the waiter approached. "Yes, sir? What seems to be the problem?" "There's an allegation of poisoning here," Bernard stated, pointing a trembling finger at the bowl of soup. "Please, take it away and assure my safety." Malik watched as Marissa's veneer eroded completely, replaced with panic that flashed through her features. "You don't have to test it. There's no poison, it's just soup. This is an overreaction." She threw her hands up, inches from Bernard, desperation edging her voice. "Yet the claim has been made, and it deserves investigation," Bernard replied evenly, his face set like stone, unmoving in the face of Marissa's protests. "If what he says is true, I must heed. For the sake of everyone in this cafe, we need to be sure." The waiter apprehensively took the bowl, eyes darting between the gathering crowd. Murmurs turned into a storm of speculation, conversations bubbling as people leaned in, captivated by the unfolding tension and drama. Would the boy's claims hold merit? Would a man of Bernard's status be made a fool in such a public arena? As the waiter retreated to the kitchen, the atmosphere thickened, simmering with strange possibilities. Malik stood rooted as anticipation crawled over him. He held back a mixture of hope and anxiety, feeling the pulse of uncertainty thrumming in the air. But the cafe, once a haven, had transformed, each step toward truth a reckoning against hidden intentions. That damning vial remained a silver specter in their midst, hovering in the air like a pendulum determining fate. "What do you want, boy?" Marissa sneered, her composure cracking, revealing the woman beneath, the vulnerable, terrified creature that existed outside the shell of glamour and intrigue. "You want money, fame. Is that it?" Malik squared his shoulders, his voice steady despite the whirlwind swirling around him. "No, I want you to stop hurting him. Because that's what you're trying to do. And I don't care if you're rich or famous, you can't get away with it." The crowd gasped as the words left Malik's mouth, raw and laced with conviction. It was as if he had pierced through the fabric of deception that cloaked the cafe in deception and eye-catching glamour. The patrons began to whisper among themselves, their doubts of Malik's sanity slowly morphing into concern, enveloping the atmosphere with a heavy solemnity. Bernard's brows knitted together in contemplation as he observed Malik, the boy standing at the precipice of confrontation where hope and danger intertwined. Just then, the waiter returned, a look of determination etched on his face as he carried a small glass vial filled with a colorless liquid, addressing Bernard. "This has been interred and tested. I am afraid we might have a situation here." The café fell silent once more as the realization washed over the crowd. An almost tangible wave of fear began sweeping through, thickening the air. Malik's heart raced as he inhaled sharply. This was it. The bitter edge of truth was cutting through the fabric of lies that had shielded them from the darkness lurking within. Bernard took the glass vial in his hands, eyes sharp and penetrating, examining the liquid swirling inside, all while his pulse quickened. If this vengeful brew was what Malik had seen poured into his soup, it would shatter the illusion of luxury that had cradled both Marissa and him so carefully, exposing the true depths of deception lurking behind polished smiles. "Marissa, if this is true, it could change everything," he said in a low, measured tone, his voice heavy with implications. The world seemed to hinge on the precipice of revelation, the patrons on tenterhooks as they awaited the unfolding of destiny and fate entwining within this moment. Malik's heart raced at their predicament. He had crossed a line into the very world he had only ever peered into, where dreams and nightmares danced with equal ferocity. The truth would not just unfold, it would explode into existence, solidifying or obliterating lives in its wake, and he was a key to it all. "Believe me, you have no idea who I am." Marissa's voice dripped with vehemence. "If you expose me, it will ruin everything." "We've already arrived at a precipice, dear," Bernard replied coldly, "and it's time for the truth to show its face." Malik stood transfixed, the weight of the world pressing down on him as he awaited Bernard's decision. Whatever happened next, life would change irrevocably. The shadows of deception spun around them like a tempest, threatening to unravel the very fabric of their existence. A fragile silence sustained the tension as they lingered on the edge of revelation, where anxiety fused with anticipation, and nothing, not wealth, nor love, nor status, could insulate them from what was about to transpire in the Park Café, where fate bent toward the will of the fearless. And so, outside the café, the city continued to pulse forward, indifferent to the metamorphosis taking place within, while Malik stood poised to witness the birth of truth from chaos, a moment that would relentlessly echo through the corridors of time, reshaping destinies entwined in a delicate dance of light and shadow. Here, in this chamber of secrets, Malik realized that he could be more than just a silent observer. Indeed, he could be the harbinger of profound change, the single thread unraveling a tapestry steeped in deceit. And in that moment, he took the first step toward embracing his unexpected role as bearer of truth, ready to upset the balance of power residing in the gilded hands of wealth, preparing to share a tale that could disrupt a world, revealing that beneath its shimmering surface lay hidden darkness, waiting patiently to be illuminated. The tension in the Park Café had reached a boiling point, and with it, an electrifying energy coursed through the air, a collective anticipation that seemed to bind everyone in a grasp of uncertainty. The moment teetered on the edge of revelation, where whispered secrets hung like ghosts in the atmosphere, waiting to be exorcised. Malik stood firm, a young vessel of determination amid eclectic voices clamoring for truth. Bernard, with the vial cradled in his palm like a fragile crystal, surveyed the room, eyes narrowing against the sea of accusatory glances darting towards Marissa. The moment weighed heavily on him. They were perched on the cusp of unearthing shadows long buried beneath layers of affluence and charm, the very fabric of his world threatened by the truth Malik had unwittingly sparked into being. "Marissa," he began, his voice steady yet layered with an edge of disappointment, "if there's any truth to what Malik claims, we cannot turn away or dismiss it. Lives are at stake here, including yours." The weight of his words loomed larger, stretching into the hearts and minds gathered in the café like a chain tethered to their very souls, binding them in silent dread. Her blue eyes flickered with defiance, but beneath that contempt lay a quivering truth. Fear seeped through her facade, bubbling at the corners like a rising tide. "You've lost your mind, Bernard. You're listening to a child." "A nobody," she spat, desperation mingling with disdain, each word laced with venom as if to shield herself from the repercussions that loomed on the horizon. But the crowd, drawn into the tempest of emotions, shifted uneasily. Doubt had begun to claw at their perceptions. What if the boy was telling the truth? What if the shimmering world they adored was a facade? Have they been blind to the dangers lurking within the glimmering prism of their reality? Malik desperately searched Bernard's eyes for a sign of understanding and belief. He had invaded a fortress of privilege, exposing himself to scorn amidst towering giants, yet it was clear to him now, this was more than just a plea for safety, it was a collision of worlds. Sensing the momentum shifting, the waiter returned, wringing his hands nervously. "Sir, we've taken the soup for analysis, and the initial results show a foreign substance. We need to send it to the lab for more comprehensive testing, but what we have so far is alarming." The buzz intensified, heads turning from Bernard to Malik, from the waiter to Marissa, the cacophony of voices merging into a symphony of chaos, each whisper dissolving into uncertainty and fear. Malik stood at the center, an unlikely sentinel straddling the line between the privileged and the forgotten, acutely aware that his next words could define the fate of them all. "We need to call the police now," Bernard asserted with authority. "If there's a chance of danger, we cannot wait. Lives hang in the balance." His voice resonated with strength, a bulwark against the panic that threatened to engulf them. Marissa recoiled, pleading as if she were a cornered animal. "You wouldn't really do that, would you? We'll ruin everything. Think of our lives, our reputation." The fear in her tone gave birth to desperation that painted her features in shades of vulnerability and desperation. "It's already hanging by a thread, Marissa," Bernard replied, the gravity of their situation weighing into every syllable. "Your actions could cost me everything. You realize I can't protect you unless we bring this to light, right?" Malik felt the intensity of Bernard's gaze pivot onto him, drawing forth his voice once more as he stepped forward, emboldened by the urgency of the moment. "What she did was wrong, and if you care about your life, your health, you need to do this. For yourself. For justice." As the utterance settled over them, a quiet that felt almost sacred enveloped the café. It was a paradoxical stillness amidst the unraveling chaos, allowing the weight of Malik's conviction to sink in. And then, Bernard made his choice. "All right, let's call them," he declared firmly, pulling out his phone, his hand steady as he dialed the number for the local authorities. Each ringing sound echoed through the silence, a pulse in the ear of many and a sharp reminder that truth demanded courage, even when it threatened to dismantle everything they held dear. As the call connected, the whispers transformed into a swell of murmurs, a tide of speculation ushering disbelief and dread, creating an atmosphere where secrets could no longer hide. Would Marissa be held accountable for her actions? Would Bernard's life shift irrevocably on the wheels of justice? "Your life could be ruined by this. Why would you do it?" Marissa pressed on, casting wild, desperate looks around the café, as if searching for an ally among the skeptical crowd. Because the truth was more valuable than the illusion of perfection, Malik thought, his heart pounding in unison with the fast-spinning gears of fate. It didn't matter to him if they were swept away by chaos. He had crossed into their world, and the tides of change threatened to pull every strand along with it. As he observed the unfolding drama, he could practically feel the simmering emotions within the walls of the café. It was raw, palpable, with everything at stake. The air strained with tension as Bernard spoke into the phone, relaying details about the potential poisoning and the escalation of events, his tone level and composed yet layered with emotion. It was a symphony of consequences amplifying across the room. With a click, the call ended, followed by a thundering silence. Police would arrive within minutes, and in those ephemeral instants, Malik felt the steady pulse of change beginning to weave itself through the very fabric of their gathering. With the arrival of law enforcement imminent, Marissa's bravado crumbled into despair, the reality dawning upon her like a torrential downpour. "You think they will listen? You think they'll believe you?" she spat, fury underlying her tone as her fear resonated like a melody in a haunting ballad. "I am not the only one who stands to lose. You're playing a dangerous game, boy." Malik felt the weight of her words, the edge of her threat trailed by an unsettling warning. He understood the risks, knew that by standing here, he was inviting consequences into his own life, a heady mix of valor and folly intertwining, but he wasn't backing down. This was about far more than the drama unfolding. This was about standing up against a darkness that threatened to consume them all, regardless of wealth or status. The café glittered like a facade, a spectacular illusion that masked truths far darker than the polished tiles beneath their feet. As moments elongated into what felt like eternity, The cafe doors swung open, and 2 officers entered, the ambience shifting yet again. They were sharply dressed in uniforms that shimmered with authority, their presence bringing forth a wave of curiosity from the gathered crowd. Bernard Green, the taller of the 2 officers, inquired, scanning the room with an air of resolve. As Bernard nodded, the officer continued, "We've received reports of a potential harmful substance added to food. Can you provide us with details?" All eyes shifted toward Bernard once again, the weight of the moment pressing heavily upon his shoulders. "Yes, thank you for coming," he said, his voice steady as he gestured toward the table where the bowl of soup had been removed. "A boy here claims he witnessed my wife poison my food, a vial of liquid he saw with his own eyes. We need to confirm the contents and ensure everyone's safety." The officers exchanged glances as they began their investigation. "We'll need to speak to both you and the child," the shorter officer replied. "What's your name, son?" "Malik," he responded, each letter sounding more resolute than the last. The boy felt the eyes of the cafe upon him, but there was a warmth inside a part of him that felt liberated. He had taken a stand, risking much for the sake of truth and integrity. As Bernard engaged with the officers, answering questions and relaying information, Malik felt an unexpected surge of camaraderie. He glanced at where Marissa sat, her eyes narrowed with a mixture of venom and despair, a tiger cornered, clawed and stripped bare of power. Her vulnerability began to expose the fissures within her bravado, revealing layers of truths and lies all tangled together. The officers requested that Malik recount the events as clearly as possible. With each word, he painted a vivid picture of what he had witnessed, the suspended moment that had ignited a whirlwind of trouble, of life colliding with deception. "I saw her pour something from the vial into the soup. I know it sounds crazy, but I think it could hurt him," Malik admitted, feeling the gravity of his role circumnavigate him. "I didn't want anyone to get hurt." The officers listened intently, their expressions transitioning into seriousness as they acknowledged the potential danger Malik had averted. The cafe, now thick with uncertainty, seemed to hold its breath in anticipation, synchronizing every heartbeat with that of the boy standing tall against the tide of privilege. As the officer gripped his notebook, resigning to the gravity of Malik's claim, Bernard felt a strange swell of gratitude towards the boy. His conviction only solidified the notion that the truth, no matter how harsh, deserved a voice amidst the glitter of deception. "Thank you for bringing this to light, Malik," he said with a solemnity that pierced the din of the chaotic cafe atmosphere. "It takes a lot of courage." But the moment of camaraderie was short-lived as Marissa erupted. "You think you can turn him against me?" "This is ludicrous," she shrieked, loud enough to draw significant attention. "You'll ruin my life. You'll ruin us all." Her outburst fell on deaf ears, as the officers took notes, their pens scratching against their pages, embroiling themselves deeper into the layers of chaos. Malik felt a sense of collective weight pressing in on him. Everyone was absorbing the gravity of betrayal, the possibility that someone so polished, so charming, could harbor intentions so wicked. As the officers began confirming the authenticity of the vial and re-engaging with the patrons to collect testimonies, the cafe morphed into a paradoxical theater of humanity, an introspection on the nature of truth, illusion, loyalty, and betrayal. As the investigation unfolded, Malik couldn't help but notice how the eyes of the patrons shifted. Those who had once held power high above all were now treated as suspects hovering over the precipice of accountability. He could see it written upon their faces: the discretion, the deception, the fear. The officers began collecting evidence discreetly while taking further notes, their voices a hushed murmur while Malik was beckoned to stand alongside them for the sake of clarity. And as they carefully extracted details from the still reeling crowd, Malik began to see that this wouldn't have to be a defeat for anyone. Perhaps it could evolve into something distinctly new: awareness, change, a shedding of illusions cloaked beneath the surface of opulence. In the midst of the whirlwind, as voices melded into one another, a mix of panic, speculation, whispers tinged with fear, Malik felt the enormity of the moment wrap around him. He was standing on the edge of something far greater than he ever anticipated, his voice echoing in a grand narrative that challenged the very essence of their existence, of societal norms, and of morality. After a time, the police collected the bowl of soup, documentation, and returned to the cafe, addressing the chaos that unfolded amidst the lingering weight of uncertainty. The officers prepared to talk to each witness individually, further mapping the complicated web of lies spun within the walls of the Park Café. This is bigger than we imagined, Malik felt within himself. No longer merely among the shadows of society, he stood poised to confront the injustices that had passed him by, ready to ensure that the dignity of all could breathe freely amidst the embers of betrayal. And so, in that moment of promise and impending reckoning, Malik recognized that he was ushering forth a tide. A new story was poised to unfurl before them, tweaked by the ever-spinning wheel of fate, revealing the intertwining of truth and deceit through the prism of humanity. As the last conversations were laced with anxious tension, the café took its very first breath towards evolution, a process of awakening and, perhaps, healing. The stage was set for a reckoning, and Malik stood at the forefront, heart soaring with the weight of the fight for truth that had burst forth amid the chaos like the dawn breaking after an all-consuming night. Whatever happens next, Malik thought as he stood firmly within the eye of the storm, I will ensure they know this. The power of truth, no matter how buried beneath privilege, can rise to the surface like a phoenix born from ashes. As the atmosphere of the Park Café thickened with tension, the reality of betrayal hung like a dark cloud, overwhelming everyone inside with its oppressive weight. Memories collided with the present, each patron suddenly confronted with the specter of disloyalty, and no one, it seemed, was above suspicion. Malik stood center stage of this unprecedented unfolding, heart racing as he felt the weight of the moment pulsate through the air. The expectant silence was a weighty blanket, suffocating in its intensity, smothering intricate thoughts of pretense and facade. The officers worked diligently amidst the shaken patrons, their notebooks scratching incessantly as they peeled back the layers of the café's opulent charm. The realization struck Malik like a sudden gust of wind. He was no longer merely an observer to the life he once lived, he was at the helm of change, a tide tugging against antiquated norms. The echoes of uncertainty rippled through the crowd, revealing cracks in their carefully constructed lives, crevices from which honesty sought to emerge, ready to rewrite their destinies. Let's get everyone's statements as quickly as possible, Officer Thompson instructed his partner, Officer Patel, both men acutely aware that time was essential in untangling the web of gossip and suspicion. They moved about the café with a methodical efficiency, gathering information methods, focused on the truth behind the startling claims that had unfurled a trauma of seismic proportions. Everyone, please bear with us. We will need you to recount your experiences, Officer Patel announced, his tone authoritative yet empathetic, seeking to instill confidence and understanding. Malik, filled with newfound purpose, nodded in agreement, noticing more patrons looking at him now, not with disdain but respect. It was a bittersweet realization. Sometimes, it took the daring of a few to spark change, to call into question the comforts once taken for granted. He even spotted a couple of patrons exchanging glances, seeming to reflect on their own moral choices, as if they had been awakened to a truth they had long ignored. Malik. Officer Thompson called over, gesturing for him to step forward. We'd like to hear your account once more in detail, if you don't mind. Sure, he replied, swallowing the lump in his throat. I saw her pour something from the vial into the bowl of soup. It was so quick. I thought I was imagining things at first. He felt the rush of courage propel his words. I knew I had to do something. I didn't want anyone, especially Mr. Green, to get hurt. Bernard stood nearby, absorbing each word, admiration growing for Malik's fortitude. This boy had plunged into the ocean of privilege and deception, unafraid to confront adversity head-on. A kindred spirit emerged in him. Both had journeyed through the harsh realities of life, albeit from divergent paths, yet bound by an unyielding resolve to uncover the truth. Thank you, Malik, Officer Thompson replied, taking notes briskly. We appreciate your bravery in coming forward. This could help us immensely. As the officer continued asking questions, Malik felt an almost surreal connection to the unfolding narrative, longing for the truth to be laid bare. Henceforth, the air vibrated with sincerity and recognition. Each voice became part of a shared narrative rather than isolated strands of criticism. Marissa, a portrait of conflict, sat a few tables away. Anxiety flashed across her features. Her once polished image now bore the scars of uncertainty and accusation. She could not bear to make eye contact with Malik, feeling the swirling eddies of fear and desperation that ensnared her spirit. At that moment, He could see she was cracking, not merely breaking under pressure, but wrestling with a cacophony of realizations brought forth by her own decisions. Officer Patel collected testimonies from other patrons, separating them into clusters, carefully measuring their expressions as they recounted what they had witnessed. With each retelling, the cafe's atmosphere transformed, apprehension ebbing in favor of cautious hope. The idea that they, too, had perhaps turned a blind eye to the toxicity swirling around them slowly began to take root. As time ticked away, whispers morphed into purposeful conversations about loyalty and trust, betrayal and redemption. They were on the cusp of acknowledging a truth that would forever alter their understanding of one another and themselves, a realization that wealth and status didn't insulate them from moral decay. Moments later, Officer Thompson returned Malik's focus to him. "We need to speak with Ms. Green now," he said gravely. The air shifted once again, a collective exhalation spiraling through the crowd in anticipation of what Marissa might reveal. Prepare the proverbial guillotine, Malik thought, though he did not wish harm upon her. He understood that the revelation of truth bore the weight of justice and accountability, even if the truth itself felt heavy and fraught with complexity. Marissa's body trembled beneath frail confidence as Officer Thompson approached. "Ms. Green, we would like to ask you a few questions," he began, steady yet firm. "It's essential that you provide your account of what has transpired here." For a moment, silence hung suspended, the air taut with her hesitations. She glanced towards Bernard, his visage a mask of disappointment, fragments of betrayal skimming across the surface of what they once shared, a love cloaked beneath layers of prestige that now threatened to unravel. She gathered her breath, attempting to reassemble her shattered poise. I didn't mean to hurt anyone," Marissa stammered with difficulty, her voice quivering as she prepared to unveil whatever truth she had hidden under the pretense of elegance. Shadows danced beneath her painted veneer, her vulnerability exposed. Things have been so complicated between us, and I just didn't know how to manage it. I thought maybe I could fix everything." The cafe stood mute, each ear straining to decipher her admission, fragile as a glass delicately hanging in the balance. Every patron became an accomplice to the truth now, waiting for the final unraveling of the narrative stitched together beneath the layers of affluence. "What were you trying to fix, Mrs. Green?" Officer Patel pressed gently but assertively, urging Marissa to delve deeper into the heart of her motives, to flesh out the truth that danced elusively at the shadows of nostalgia and regret. At that moment, Malik found himself absorbed in her account, feeling the weight of her fear coat the air. He truly believed she hadn't initially intended to commit a crime. Perhaps she had been ensnared in the liminal space between love and desperation, a place fraught with regret and despair, fueled by trembling intentions. "I thought if Bernard had a taste of something new, something powerful, it might reignite something in our relationship. The thrill of being together again, of making plans, rekindling what we once had before work consumed us," Marissa admitted, tears pooling in her blue eyes as vulnerability washed over her story. "I didn't see how things could spiral out of control. I just wanted something to change." Malik's heart ached for her. She was caught in a tangled web of unrealistic expectations and haunting insecurities. In attempting to conjure passion and devotion, she had tread dangerous waters, revealing the fragility beneath the glimmering surface of their seemingly idyllic lives. "If the lab results show that what you used was harmful, there could be serious consequences," Officer Thompson stated, his tone shifting toward the inevitability of the law. "I know," Marissa whispered, her distraught voice trembling with defeat. "But I never meant for anyone to be harmed. I was scared, and I didn't think. I never thought through what could happen." The shattering truth left her vulnerable, her mask of control slipping further beneath the weight of her confession. A heavy stillness engulfed the cafe, the patrons bearing witness to her unmasking. They sensed the raw humanity of a woman lost in desperation, consumed by the fear of losing what she held dearest, driven into reckless choices by the constraints of her glamorous facade. As the confession unfolded, each patron grappled with their perceptions, beginning to reflect on their own choices amidst the tidal wave of privilege and deception that had colored their lives. It was a point of reckoning, reflection, and awakening spilling forth into the atmosphere, shedding light on the shadows that had so long cloaked them. Bernard's brow furrowed as he listened, his heart a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. Love for a woman he had once cherished, disappointment at her choices, and a dawning understanding of the complexities hidden behind their luxurious facade. "Marissa," he began, and for the first time, the warmth in his voice softened. "We were coasting along and lost sight of each other. We drifted into a cycle of expectations, of loneliness. I never wanted to lose you. I didn't mean to put you in danger." Marissa's voice trembled as she met his gaze. "I don't want to lose us, lose this life. I was just trying to protect something. And in the end, I jeopardized everything." Malik felt the storm of emotions swirling beneath the surface of the cafe, a rush of empathy washing over him. In that vulnerable moment, their shared vulnerability illuminated a poignant truth. The webs woven in desperation could entangle not just the individual but those around them. In the echo of their fraught connection, Malik bore witness to redemption resting precariously on the precipice of consequence, the line between guilt and innocence, light and shadow, blurring in the dim light of remorse. At that moment, the officers exchanged glances, processing the gravity of the unfolding confessions before them. They had borne witness to the unraveling of a life shaped by ambition, fear, and turmoil, a truth surfaced from the depths of darkness, breathing life into fragility and belief. In the minutes that passed, the cafe transformed into a sanctuary for personal confrontations. Patrons whispered amongst themselves, discussing the balance between desire for excitement and the repercussions of choices made in haste. Officer Thompson stepped forward once again. "Marissa, what you did was wrong, and it carries consequences, but given the context we've understood today, we will proceed cautiously. You will need to cooperate fully with our investigation." Malik's heart raced at the prospect of justice looming. Could this turn into an opportunity for understanding and ultimately for growth? As Marissa nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks, he could not help but feel she was ready to face the repercussions of her choices, not merely for the wrong she had committed, but for a chance to rebuild and redefine herself amid the ruins. From the shadows of betrayal, a flicker of hope began to emerge. It was not merely about punishment, it was about reconciliation, understanding the fragility of humanity, the duality between love and desperation. Beyond the walls of wealth and sophistication, there was a truth to be embraced, one that transcended material possessions and ego, where vulnerability unveiled courage anew. "Whatever happens next," Malik whispered to himself, feeling the pulse of the moment thrum with possibilities, "we can learn from this." And so, as the investigation continued, Malik stood unwavering, a silent witness to the birth of empathy from the ashes of betrayal in the Park Café. Change now rode on the wings of a shared narrative that was slowly taking form, a tapestry of realization woven through the choices of all involved, urging them toward a new beginning painted with strokes of compassion and understanding. The journey toward truth was arduous, and while the path remained steep, Malik held on to the belief that sometimes, within the darkest corners of despair, a glimmer of hope could emerge, illuminating the way to healing amid the emotional wreckage. As the accounts crystallized into forms of understanding, the story sought to unfold not with punishment alone, but with redemption, a chance to build anew, threading the past with newfound wisdom and compassion, heralding a tide of change ready to wash over them all. Every word, every confession, transformed this story from mere chaos into an orchestrated symphony, a lifeline connected to the human spirit that transcended separation to intertwine their fates anew. And so, within the embrace of that fragile yet powerful interconnectedness, Malik resolved that he would remain steadfast amid the tempest, an active participant in this shifting narrative, ready to defend the sanctity of truth, however tangled and complex it may become. After all, the rebirth of understanding began with a single courageous step, one that dared to challenge the status quo. The atmosphere within the Park Café had shifted significantly, yet the tension lingered like a distant thunder, a reminder of the tumultuous events that had transpired. As the officers continued their investigation, a sense of anticipation hung heavy in the air. The patrons no longer whispered among themselves in hushed tones of speculation. Instead, they lingered in collective reflection, wrestling with the complexities laid bare before them, the distinct lines between guilt and accountability, intention and consequence. Malik stood off to the side, still processing the intensity of the past several hours. He observed the faces around him, noting how they had transformed from expressions of shock and denial into shades of remorse and understanding, as if collectively awakening from a deeply held dream. The truth was a powerful catalyst, one that had the capacity to reshape lives, and he felt it pulse with urgency within the walls of the cafe. As Marissa sat, tears glistening on her cheeks, a moment encapsulated the gravity of her previous actions, a moment that could lead to acknowledgement and perhaps even healing. With Officer Patel discussing the seriousness of her actions further, there still lingered the question of how to move forward in a way that could restore the broken threads between her, Bernard, and the community that surrounded them. "Marissa," Officer Thompson began, his voice steady and resolute, "what you did will have consequences. It's crucial that we understand the extent of your actions and how they affect not only Bernard but also every person in this cafe." In that moment, Malik stepped forward. "Can you help her?" he ventured, surprising even himself by the courage swelling within. "I believe she didn't want to hurt anyone. Can we work on finding a way for her to make amends? Maybe we can rebuild from here, together." Silence enveloped the cafe once more as every person turned their gaze to Malik, a collective breath held in suspense. His words felt like a lifeline, casting a glimmer of possibility upon an otherwise darkened path. The vulnerability of his statement bore an innate truth. Change wasn't merely about accountability, it was also about reclamation, understanding, and unity. Officer Patel nodded appreciatively, a soft smile breaking through the sternness of his expression. "That's a powerful sentiment, Malik. The journey to accountability doesn't have to be a solitary one. Every act can be a step towards healing if approached with honesty and transparency," he affirmed. Marissa's sobs subsided as she lifted her head, her blue eyes brimming with a mixture of awe and gratitude. "I would do anything to make it right, to fix what I've broken," she declared, her voice firm yet unsteady. "It starts with acknowledging the pain I've caused and, hopefully, leading to reconciliation." Bernard stepped forward, a newfound resoluteness sparking in his gaze. "We can work together, but it's essential that we open lines of communication. We need to talk, really talk, about what led us here." He pulled a chair beside Marissa, taking a moment to look her in the eyes, a hint of vulnerability breaking through his emotional armor. The once opulent cafe, now the vessel of revelation, reverberated with shared emotions as the patrons witnessed the rekindling of a powerful connection, one forged through adversity. The humanity of Bernard and Marissa crystallized amid their struggles, illuminating the path towards an uncertain yet hopeful future. As conversations began to flow organically, Malik watched in awe. The patrons gradually engaged in deeper discussions about trust, vulnerability, and the bravery it took to confront fears and flaws. They shared what they had learned about themselves throughout these trying moments, things they might have never confronted without the catalyst of pain. "I can't believe I let the grind of life blind me," one patron remarked, his voice strong yet threaded with vulnerability. "We've been so caught up in appearances, yet so many of us are struggling silently." Malik listened intently, aware that the cafe had transformed from an exclusive gathering place cloaked in pretense into a room full of people, each with their own stories, failures, and losses, each on a quest for understanding. Slowly but surely, that same current of sincerity began to move through them all. It whirled around like whispers of fresh beginnings, infusing the cafe with a symphony of connections once thought irreparable. Hours flowed like a river beneath a waning sun as the patrons found solace in one another's stories, including those who had initially cast judgment on Malik. He felt the warmth wash over him, a sense of belonging blossoming from the shared courage it took to confront difficult truths, a vivifying force that pushed aside the cobwebs of shame and retribution. Officer Patel nodded appreciatively, a soft smile breaking through the sternness of his expression. Hours flowed like a river beneath a waning sun as the patrons found solace in one another's stories, including those who had initially cast judgment on Malik. He felt the warmth wash over him, a sense of belonging blossoming from the shared courage it took to confront difficult truths, a vivifying force that pushed aside the cobwebs of shame and retribution. As the cafe grew quiet with introspection, Malik ventured out into the evening air, the sun dipping beyond the horizon, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. He could feel the palpable energy of change surrounding him, a refreshing breeze that whispered of possibilities yet to come. He closed his eyes, taking a deep breath to absorb the quiet magic of the moment. In the aftermath of the cafe's reckoning, Malik felt a stirring within him, a call to action fueled by the understanding that life, indeed, was imperfect but beautiful precisely because of its flaws. Each person ambled through the understandable missteps of life, harboring stories that intertwined to create a rich narrative tapestry. As dusk fell, Malik turned to see the cafe's windows glow warmly with the rekindled laughter and friendship blossoming within. He knew this was just the beginning, a beginning of healing, connection, and renewal, a chance for each person to redefine their paths and forge forward together. And in that renewed presence of empathy, Malik held tightly to one guiding belief: growth could stem from adversity, transformation could emerge from humility and accountability. The cafe had become a haven, representing the hope that healing was not only possible but essential for a brighter future. For Malik, the journey remained, one that called him to venture forth not only bravely but compassionately as well, emerging as both a witness and an architect of change. He took one last grateful glance toward the park cafe, heart full and mind alight with the potential of new beginnings. The journey toward reconciliation, though challenging, was a worthy endeavor that would redefine not just the lives within those walls but the very essence of humanity itself. With a sense of quiet determination that could only burgeon from unity and reflective growth, Malik sighed contentedly and headed down the street, ready to embrace whatever awaited him in the world beyond. For in the grand symphony of life, he had learned that even amidst discord, the melody of connection and hope could triumph, guiding each soul toward a harmonious tomorrow. Thus, the chapters that followed would no longer be bound in silence or shadow but would radiate light and understanding, the collective triumph of a community determined to emerge from adversity, together.